But they did make an announcement this week, Jason, that All In, though we have All In on Sunday at Wembley Stadium, will not be returning to Wembley Stadium in 2025. They will be back in England in 2025, but no mention of Wembley Stadium was made.
2026.
2026, I'm sorry. And in 2025, they are moving All into Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas. So All In Texas is going to take place on Saturday, July 12th, 2025. And it's also the first pro wrestling event that will be held at the venue, which is the home of the MLB's Texas Rangers. Leading up to the event, a series of events in Arlington are being planned. So we don't know if that includes another residency like AEW is doing right now with Collision, which has done very well for them. So maybe we'll see something like that again next year. And while appearing on the Dan Le Batard show, Tony Khan was asked whether this was the last year that they would run the show at the stadium. Khan noted that isn't the case, as they plan to run at least one show in England next year and Wembley again in 2026. Khan said, no, definitely not. We love having AEW at Wembley Stadium. We will be back in England in 2026. You can bet you'll see us there in 2025 as well. It won't be AEW All In, but it'll be something different. But we have some big plans coming up next year as well. It's a great time for AEW. Now, nobody knows what he means by that. I know Craven Cottage has been mentioned a lot lately in regards to them going there with AEW, whether it's for a pay-per-view or a Dynamite. But I've been saying this, Jason. I wish that they would actually do this in other different aspects as well with their pay-per-view schedule. But moving out of Wembley next year is a thumbs-up move, in my honest opinion. I think moving it to Arlington, having it take place at Globe Life Field, I think is a major move for them. It's a market that they've never had a pay-per-view in. It's going to do incredibly well for them. I believe it's going to net them anywhere between 30 and 35,000 people potentially. I know you could probably go up to 45,000, I think, is the capacity for baseball. Whatever the case may be, it'll probably be in that vicinity, 30 to 35,000. That's a great number for them. You know, I feel like that is a major success. That's nothing to snuff at. But going to Wembley next year would have been, like you mentioned last year, the law of diminishing returns. I was in attendance last year. I mean, I had vertigo sitting there with the amount of people and the energy and the loudness sitting amongst 81,000. 81,000 was a huge number for them. He gloated about that number for fucking months on end.
He should.
He should. I mean, I joke about it, but he absolutely should. I mean, he takes that number to bed with him every night, and he's praying that Triple H doesn't move WrestleMania or SummerSlam into that venue so he breaks the record. But this year they have about 50,000, just about 50,000. They're shy of 50,000. I know they are set up for just a little bit over 50,000, but 81,000 to 50,000, Jason. That's to me that's a very noticeable decrease. And I said this on social media yesterday. You know, it's just not Wembley. It's Grand Slam as well. You look at what they did 3 years ago for Grand Slam, 21,000 people at Arthur Ashe Stadium. And now you're looking at them, they basically, and it's a month away, don't get me wrong. I mean, they could fill 6,000, 7,000 people in there, but even that number compared to the 21,000, where the fuck did all these people go? So, you know, again, like that's my whole opinion on it. Move out of these places, man. Doing them year after year after year in the same place is just fucking awful. You know, you get it once, you don't need to see it again. Running it twice is okay, but a third time, a fourth time, you're just running into problems there. And it leaves now the door for WWE to be open to Wembley Stadium in 2025. That's the first thing that I thought when this news was announced. Not to take away from the AEW announcement, but you and I talked about this as well, moving Wembley and WWE together for SummerSlam 2025. I think that is now more of a possibility than ever before, celebrating 33 years of SummerSlam next year in Wembley Stadium, and next year being John Cena's last full-time year as a full-time performer for the WWE. I think it's just magic waiting to be made. But Tony Khan moving this show out of Wembley is a thumbs-up move, in my opinion. I'm glad he made this decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was smart. Again, to go, you mentioned going from 81,000 to 50, and I think by the time they get to Showtime, it'll probably end up being a little over 50, maybe 51. 50,000 people in a stadium. There's no negative way that you can look at that and go, that's a terrible number, right? Obviously, it's a lot less than 80,000. I don't know why people, though, would have expected them to do 81,000 again the year after. I mean, I talked about this a year ago. I said, they're going to come back to Wembley again next year. They're not getting 81,000. The number will go down. Now, I didn't know how far down the number would go, but I figured if they can still pull 50 to 60,000, that's a healthy number of people. And that's about where they're going to end up. So yes, it's a noticeable decrease, but 50,000 people is nothing to scoff at. Okay. And there's no other wrestling company in the world outside of WWE that could do that right now. I mean, New Japan, they run the Tokyo Dome every year, which they could probably fit close to 60,000 if they really maxed it out. And that sure as shit hasn't happened in many years. Okay. Even when New Japan was doing really well, business wise, they weren't doing that. So that's to take nothing away from them pulling the numbers that they've pulled so far. But if they come back again next year, it was 80,000 last year. This year it's 50,000. Next year it wouldn't even be 50.
No.
Next year, maybe between 40 and 50, but it's entirely possible next year would be down to 30 to 40. And now you're getting into territory where it's like, okay, now you have this gigantic stadium and you only have 30,000 people. You shouldn't be running Wembley Stadium, right? There are other places you can run. You mentioned Craven Cottage. That's something that Tony Khan mentioned years ago. He would love to run a show there. And I think when I had looked it up, I think for a wrestling event, they could fit somewhere between 20 and 25 in a venue like that, I believe. So that's a very real possibility. We could see an AEW show there next year. I don't know what other events, sports might run there. There's certain times a year they couldn't run. That would be the smarter way to go. I think skipping Wembley is a smart move because it's one of two things. Either Tony understands what I just said as far as, okay, if we go back, we may not be able to put even this many people in. Maybe better to take a year off and then come back 2 years from now, and we could try to put a big crowd back in there. Use this as an opportunity to run our first official, big stadium show in the U.S. Again, him saying that it's their first stadium show in the U.S. is funny because they've run Arthur Ashe Stadium now for a few years.
Yeah, I did notice that, and they kind of glossed that over. But it's Arthur Ashe Stadium. I mean,
it's a stadium.
In a sense, it's not a fucking football stadium or a baseball stadium, but it is a stadium.
No, it's a tennis stadium. It's a stadium. Yeah. So I laughed at that because it's like, dude, you've run 3 shows there, and you have another one coming up in about 6 weeks. So, yeah, it's technically not their first stadium show, but as far as a big baseball or football stadium, yes, it is their first domestic stadium show. And I saw a lot of negative, opinions about that. Look at all their attendance woes domestically, which is a very real problem that they have. Why are they running a stadium show? I think the stadium show will do well. You mentioned 35,000. I don't even think they need that many. I think if they can at least pull 25,000, in a venue that, depending on the setup, they could fit maybe 40-ish. Even that, I think, would be worth doing it. And I think they'll get more than that. I don't know that they'll get 40, but they could.
Do you know how they ensure that they get a great crowd like that next year? Write stories that people are going to be captivated and interested by, and make sure the television product is as hot as it could be. As long as the television product is hot, people will go out there and spend money to go see you live. I've said this for years with WWE, and everybody laughed at me. Do it. That's the only way it's going to work. And trust me, it's going to happen that way. If they put on good television, people will come out. Simple. I don't know why this is such a foreign language to everybody.
But it also being their first big stadium show in the U.S., I think you're going to have a little bit of that Wembley factor in that there's going to be a novelty to it. And I think if they can create this feeling around it that makes it feel like a happening, like this is a really big deal. We're making history, right? If they can really promote it that way and couple that with having 1 or 2 really big attractions on that show, whether it's tapping into an ex-WWE major name that they signed and they want to have that person in a feature match, or they just hit upon a storyline between now and then. Look at what happened with MJF and Cole last year. They kind of lucked into that. Right, I don't think they expected that to take off in the way that it did. And those two guys closed the show at Wembley Stadium in front of 80,000 people. So it's a combination of different things and also good, local promotion. But if they can hit on that one story and this elite storyline right now, which I think is what they were hoping that this would be, this is not it. But if they can hit on that one big story or one name gets super hot at just the right time. And Tony has enough sense to really take the time over a period of months before they come to Texas to really build a good story around that person, whoever it is. That's all it takes. You couple that with the novelty factor, and they could put 35 or 40,000 people in that building. So I think that show will do well. And we'll see at that point how the product is in the summer of 2025. I don't know. Is the AEW product going to be worse? Is it going to be better? Look at the way WWE has exploded. I'm not saying that they'll do the exact kind of business they're doing, but WWE exploded in a major way that I don't know that a lot of people were necessarily expecting them to, even with Vince, being knocked out of the picture. I mean, it has boomed in ways that even I wasn't expecting. So who the hell knows a year from now? I hope the product is doing gangbusters because that's good for everyone.
Yep.
It's good for AEW. It's good for the talent. It's good for content creators. It's good for the fans. So you can't predict 12 months away how things are going to be. But if they do what you suggested, and again, if they can get with a little bit of luck as well going into that show, I think that show could be a big success for them. But there's another stadium show as well that has been rumored for 2025.
Yes. And before we get into that, I'm just thinking ahead now. I'm listening to you speak. What could they do creatively for that show to really kind of add on top of the first time aura of being in the States for All In? I'm thinking maybe Christian and Edge reunion. Maybe we get them back together. Maybe put them against the Bucks. Maybe put them against FTR. Mercedes versus Athena in a major women's match. I mean, I'm just thinking ahead. I don't know where Swerve and Ospreay and MJF are going to really factor in, but just thinking off the top of my head, something major like that, Edge and Christian coming back together at this stage of their career, I think that would be a huge selling point there.
Yeah, I mean that's just one. That's one idea. Yeah. We don't even know what the roster is going to look like.
They got to be healthy first and foremost with all the injuries they have.
Yeah, I mean look at Kenny, right?
Yeah.
I no doubt in my mind that Tony Khan was hoping and banking on Kenny Omega being healthy so he could do Omega Okada at Wembley this year. And it's unfortunate that, Kenny is nowhere close to being ready. I saw there was an update today on Kenny, and he's still in some pain. He hasn't been able to, train the way that he wants to yet. He's not close to being back yet. Ideally, they would have him healthy enough to play a major role on the show next year. I think Kenny Omega in a big feature match on that show, maybe some kind of first time ever match. That could be one attraction. You have to appeal to different audiences. You want to appeal to your core audience and like the real rabid wrestling fans, but they're also going to need something that appeals to the masses on that show. But we can't sit here and predict what the roster is going to look like in 12 months. Tony Khan is going to sign more people. I know there are people, I'm sure, who are on that roster right now who are very unhappy, who may not even be in AEW a year from now. I look, I brought his name up a few times over the last few weeks. Because we haven't seen him on TV. I've gotten questions about, Wardlow. He's not very happy right now. And there's been a lot of speculation about him as well. And again, my understanding is, unlike Ricky, is that he's locked down for some years. I don't know what's going to happen with him, but that's just, again, one of many scenarios that will play out, and the roster as it currently exists could look different a year from now. But if they do the things we mentioned, I think that they can have a hugely successful show next year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I may actually be there next year because I have a couple of online friends that I've never met in person in real life.
Have you been to Texas before?
I've been to Texas for a wedding. It was hot as balls. It was like 107 degrees. I didn't have a good time, but at the wedding I did. But I would love to visit the Dallas area. I hear so many good things about it, and I might find myself down there. Who knows?
Dallas is nice. I was there for WrestleMania 32, which was a terrible WrestleMania. But being in that stadium, that was Cowboy Stadium. I mean, then they claimed 101,000. I mean, that's their usual exaggeration. But whatever the actual number was, there were a lot of people in that stadium, and when you stand up and you're in the middle of it and you look around and you just realize like you can't even fathom how many people are there. And then just going around and the food down there was like one barbecue joint that people were like, oh, you got to stop there. You got to have the food there. The food was fantastic. So I wish I had more time down there. But yeah, if you've never been to Dallas before, Dallas is a fun place.